Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online message platform. We're so excited that you've decided to join us today. If you're new to Inland Hills Church, we are so excited that you are here with us today, and we want to get to know you a little bit more. So please take a moment to click the link below the video. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how we could be praying for you this week. If you call Inland Hills home, thank you for your continued partnership in giving with us today. You can continue to do so by visiting inlandhills.com/give. Now we are about to dive into an exciting message, and we just want to invite you to lean into the words that you are about to hear. It is our hopes that these words and this message uplifts you during the week ahead and just encourages you throughout whatever you are facing.
Good morning. It's estimated that up to 85% of the U.S. population struggles with low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-confidence. And that's a massive amount of people. And in fact, it's such a massive amount of people that number may not even feel like it fits with your own experience of other people. Like you may not feel like, Josh, it doesn't seem like 85% of the people I encounter or that I know, or maybe even 60 or 70% actually have low self-esteem or low self-confidence. That doesn't seem possible, but you need to understand that people struggle with this particular issue in different kinds of ways. For some people, they do tend to kind of wear it on their sleeve a bit. All of their friends would know that they struggle with low self-esteem and low self-worth. They talk about it rather frequently, and they seem to actually, like everyone can kind of point to the ceiling it seems to have placed on their life. They don't try to do hard things because they assume they might fail, or they don't go out for that new position because they know that they won't get it. They just kind of like, they live with this self-doubt that they just kind of walk around with all the time. Those are the cases where it's more obvious to their friends and their close associates and family members that they might struggle with low self-esteem. But for many people, low self-esteem actually causes us to project high confidence. We might struggle internally to really believe that we can be as much as we think we should be or could be, or to live into what we've been called to, but what we project is a lot of confidence. Or our low self-esteem leaves us trying to constantly prove ourselves to other people by constantly trying to succeed at the next thing. And so we think, if I can just land that job, or if I can just get that raise, or if I can just marry that person, or if I can just be successful in that new venture, or if I can just launch that new startup, if I can do those things, then I'll be successful. And finally, I'll feel successful on the inside as well. And all this self-doubt I've ever had will finally go away. But if you struggle with self-esteem and self-worth and self-confidence in that kind of way, actually checking those boxes off as you go down the list, it never actually solves it for you. Your ability to actually believe that you can do it or be the person you can, or that you actually have value and worth, it's always just over the horizon. It never actually arrives. Now, I stand before you today recognizing that I'm a very privileged person, frankly. Like I was born into a family, a solid middle class family, and way more important than our socioeconomic status was the fact that both of my parents loved me unconditionally and my brother unconditionally from the day that we were born. I never had to wonder if I had to achieve something or to succeed at something in order to garner my parents' affection, their love, their adoration. That was never a question for me. And I recognize that, frankly, for huge portions of the population, they are not fortunate enough to be born into those circumstances. In fact, my dad was very successful in what he did. He's an evangelist. He's been traveling all across the United States for over 40 years, speaking at conferences and retreats and revivals and all kinds of events, telling people about Jesus Christ. And he was one of the most sought-after evangelists in the U.S. He continues to do that to this day, and he's still booked up a year or two in advance. Like, people really enjoy him. So he's been successful. My mom has been a partner with him in ministry, stayed home with us when we were kids, and was just one of those moms that always knew, exactly what the meal plan was for the week and how to get us to all the things and to organize all the stuff. Like, they were just both very successful and very helpful. They've gotten a little older now, and as you get older, things start to change for them a little bit. My dad doesn't have quite as much energy as he used to have. He's 66 years old now. He just turned 66 a couple of weeks ago. And I actually sent my boys, Jack and William, who are 6 years old and 3 years old, to go be with my parents a few months ago. And so they spent an entire week at my parents' house. And my dad called me a couple of weeks ago to let me know, like, hey, I just wanted to thank you again for sending Jack and William. We had such a great time with them when they were here. It's the longest we've ever gotten to spend with them, just us by ourselves. And it was just really great. But son, I got to tell you, they are exhausting. Like, I was just so tired the whole time they were here. I was just having to constantly output energy. And he said the last day they were here, they took him to a water park. And so my kids love water parks. And so my dad was going with Jack down all the different slides and carrying him through the lazy river. And the last slide of the day, they wanted to go on this one really big slide, and it required you to each have an inner tube. So Jack's 6, he's not real tall. So my dad's carrying both inner tubes at the end of the day up like 4 flights of stairs to get to the top of this thing. And there's twin slides, so one and the other. So my dad puts Jack's inner tube down first, and then he puts his own down, and he sits down, and he starts watching Jack try to get in the inner tube. And the ride operator comes over and starts help Jack in his inner tube. And then the next thing my dad knows, someone's tapping him on the shoulder, and it's the ride operator, and he says, Sir, you can't sleep here. My dad had fallen asleep in his inner tube. Jack's not there anymore. He's long gone at that point. He doesn't even know what happens. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. He says, so I woke up and immediately I'm plunging like 6 stories down, like screaming my head off. So things start to change a little bit. A few months before that, my mom was spending time with my wife, and my wife Emily was folding some of our clothes. And she was folding my boxer briefs. And now you know I wear boxer briefs, and I'm sorry about that, but it's important to understand the story, so here we go. So my wife's folding my boxer briefs, and my dad apparently had just started wearing boxer briefs recently. For all the rest of the years of his life, he's worn tighty-whities. And now you know that, and I'm sorry about that too. And so, however my wife is folding these, my mom says, oh, I haven't folded David's like that. That makes a lot more sense, like the way you're tucking the legs up. I don't know what my mom was doing before, ripping the legs off and setting them aside. I don't know. But she decided like it made more sense what Emily was doing. So she comes back home and she decides to start folding my dad's underwear differently. So a few days go by, and she's working in the office one morning, and she hears my dad in the bedroom go, what in the heck? Betty, are you doing something different with my underwear? And she said, yeah, I've started folding them differently. He said, well, that's the 3rd day in a row I've put them on backwards. I thought I was having a stroke. So things change as you get older. But some things stay the same. What has stayed the same for us is that my parents continue to be there for us. I mean, I could call them right now. I could call them in the middle of the service, and I won't, and you're welcome for that. And they would try to answer, and if I needed something, if I had a concern, if I had any self-doubt, honestly, they would talk me through that, pray with me through that. Like that's what I grew up with. And I recognize that most of us, many of us, don't have that kind of family of origin. And here's what we know, because psychologists have done a bit of studying about this over the last several years, that there are reasons that you might have low self-confidence. And in fact, while there's many reasons for this, there are 3 primary indicators. And if any one or more of these 3 things are true, there's a really good chance that you may struggle with some type of low self-esteem or low self-confidence. And so here's the first one: the success of your same-sex parent. And so if you're a man, we're talking about your father. If you're a woman, we're talking about your mother. And we're talking about their level of success. So for instance, if your father was a titan of industry and was making hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year, and then you go out and you're earning a middle-class income, even though certainly by the world standard all around the world, and by most standards, even in the United States, you would be doing very well for yourself and you would be very successful. In your mind, you may not feel successful because in your mind, you don't measure up to the success of your father. Same with your mother. If you're a woman, if you saw your mother as very successful, and that could be that she was successful in the business world, it could be that she was successful at home, however you imagine that, if you feel like she was more successful than you are, had it more together, was able to accomplish more things, was able to juggle more things at the same time, you may feel like a bit of a failure. And this has a huge hit on your self-esteem. Number 2, the success of your peer group. These are the people who you went to high school with or went to college with. People you actually know by name, and they're around your age group, and they had a similar education as you. And if you start to see them being far more successful than you are, it could do a massive amount of damage to your own self-confidence. In fact, if you happen to have gone to college, for instance, with someone who ended up becoming president of the United States of America, you could feel like, well, I mean, what am I doing here? Or someone who started up something in Silicon Valley that then got funded with millions or billions of dollars, you can start feeling like you're not worth enough. And what do you think has made this exponentially worse over the last decade? Social media, yeah. It wasn't a trick question. You totally nailed it. Didn't even need to phone a friend. You are awesome. So yeah, social media makes it a lot worse because even if we are highly unsuccessful, we can make ourselves look really successful on social media. It's not even that hard. Most of us, even who have like generally really bad days, there's usually 3 or 4 moments we could probably take a photo of and make it look like it's a good day, right? And so we then are oftentimes driven to low self-confidence, not even by the actual success of our peers, but by the perceived success of our peers. So if it looks like someone is doing a lot better than us, we start to doubt ourselves. The third thing is the kind of love you received as a child. Did you receive unconditional love as a child, or did you receive conditional love as a child? Now, I want to be really clear about what I'm talking about here. I'm not asking the question, did you have boundaries or not? If you have unconditional love for your children, please hear me on this, the healthy thing for you to do for them is to set clear boundaries for them. I mean, when they're that age, they're still trying to build the container of their actual self, and you need to help them understand what's healthy and what's not, what's acceptable and what's not. There's a time for that to question that, for them to question that when they get in their teenage and their college years, but you at least need to start them off with a set of rules and guidelines and boundaries. That's just healthy development. In fact, I shared with a group of men over this weekend at our men's retreat, which was awesome, by the way. If you're a man and you didn't come, you really missed out. I hope you feel bad about yourself. Okay, so I don't. You're wonderful and fantastic. All right, so over the weekend, we just talked about the fact that one of the goals you should have as a parent, is to help your child be socially acceptable to others by the time they're age 4. That's a good goal, that other people can hang out with them and not dread that experience, basically, by the time they're 4. That's a solid goal. And to do that, you're going to have you'll have to give them some rules and guidelines. I happen to have a 3-year-old who will be 4 in just a few months, and the time is running down on me, okay? So we're working on it. But the kind of love you received as a child, was it conditional or unconditional? Not did they set boundaries, but even when I crossed those boundaries, did they still love me? Even when they reprimanded me or disciplined me, did they still love me? Even when they grounded me, did they still love me? Or did they only cheer for me? Did they only show me adoration when I did well at my softball game or my basketball game or my soccer game? Did they only really like what I was doing when I was doing something that they cared about a lot? Or did they love me unconditionally? If any one of these things is true for you, that you don't feel like you live up to the success of your same-sex parent or the success of your peer group, or that you didn't receive unconditional love as a child, if any one of those is true, you may struggle with low self-confidence. If 2 or more are true, it's almost a certainty. And there are more possibilities, obviously, but these are the top 3 indicators. Which, of course, brings us to Moses. You totally saw that coming, right? Last week, we started to talk about Moses, who is a character we find in the book of Exodus and forward in our Old Testament in the Scriptures. And for many people, even those of us who maybe didn't grow up in church or really aren't sure what we think about faith right now, we may have heard about Moses, even like in popular culture. There's been a number of movies made about the life of Moses, about the 10 Commandments and that kind of thing. Last week, we talked about Moses' origin story, and just very briefly, Moses is born a Hebrew child who should have had his life taken, but instead ends up being a son of the Pharaoh, essentially. He ends up getting adopted into the kingdom of Egypt. And while all of his Hebrew brothers and sisters, all of his relatives, are slaves in the kingdom of Egypt, and they've been slaves for over 400 years, Moses gets to live the life of a young prince. Best education, had total access to healthcare, and the best of everything that Egypt had to offer. So he's got Hebrew blood coursing through his veins at the same time that he is called into the court of the Pharaoh and is living that kind of life. And so Moses continues to go about his life, and then he gets increasingly upset that his bloodline, the Hebrew people, are being taken advantage of. He gets increasingly upset that his bloodline is being enslaved by the very people who he is receiving great benefit from. And so he ends up killing one of the Egyptian slavers who's whipping and punishing some of his Hebrew brothers and sisters. And then he ends up having to flee. He runs away from Egypt because the Pharaoh finds out that he did it, and he's going to kill Moses in return. So you have Moses then, who escapes to this place called Midian and marries a woman from there, and his father-in-law ends up being the priest of Midian, and he's tending sheep on the backside of the mountain in the dark and quiet places, way far away from the action. This is a guy who had a holy discontent around what was happening to his Hebrew brothers and sisters, but now he's taken himself out of the game. He's no longer even able to affect that in a positive way. And last week what we saw is that God, not randomly, but very intentionally, seeks to enlist Moses to help free the Israelites from the Egyptian slavers. But Moses really struggles with this. He's at the lowest he's ever been in his life. Imagine, essentially, your peer group and the person you kind of look to as a parental figure are the most powerful people in the world. And you've been forced to leave that power and leave that life of luxury and to tend sheep on the backside of the mountain. And essentially, the love that you've experienced in your life has been very conditional. Follow after the Pharaoh and you'll be loved. Kill one of his slavers and you'll be killed. Every single one of those things that we just talked about, Moses has had to face in a negative kind of way. And so he finds himself in Midian. His self-esteem, his self-confidence is low. God meets him and says, I want to enlist you in this huge mission to go against Pharaoh and to free all of the Israelites. And unsurprisingly, Moses doesn't feel like he's up to the task. And so I want to just kind of repeat a little bit of what we looked at last week, the very end of the scripture passage, and then we'll pop into some new things for today. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. By the way, when I was a kid and I read this, when I thought milk, I thought probably cow's milk. And when I thought honey, I thought, honeybees, like bee honey, kind of honey. But probably what this is talking about, this long ago, is honey that's made by crushing up dates and using the juice that you get to crush up dates to make a kind of honey out of that, and milk from goats. And that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. I just thought it was interesting. Okay. The home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. And I have seen the way of the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler in the world at this point, to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. So this is the call. This is the call that God says. And what does Moses answer? Thank you. I've been worried about this for a long time. I really wanted this to go well. I wanted to see these people released. I'm happy to come alongside of you. No, that's not how he feels about it at all. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Who am I is a question that we actually try to answer for ourselves really our entire lives. Who am I? What is my identity? And we answer that question by looking for associations, both meaningful and fairly shallow. I mean, there's a meaningful piece that I would say, for instance, I am Josh. I'm the husband of Emily, the father of William and Jack, the son of Betty and David. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. Like, those are all kind of meaningful ways of who I am. I'm a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers. I love all those different teams. I think they're all great. That's on kind of a shallow level. So you may consider yourself like, yeah, I'm a parent or I'm this kind of vocational, this employee, but I'm also a Rams fan. Or some of you say I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I'm kidding. No one's ever said that. So it just depends. Like, who am I, though? You're trying to find these pieces of identity for yourself. And you're trying to answer this question, who am I really? But what Moses is asking goes even a step deeper than this. It's not about associations. It's not about what I espouse as my theology or my political belief or anything else. What Moses is saying is like, you're looking for someone to go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. Who am I to do that? Because God, you need to understand, from where I'm sitting, it feels like I am pretty worthless. That's who I am. God, you've seen my resume. You know who I am. I'm the guy who was in a position of power and authority and may have been able to help the Israelites at some point if I had been smart about it, but I wasn't. I killed the Egyptian slaver, and now I'm out here in the middle of the desert tending after sheep. That's who I am. How on earth do you think I am qualified to go to Pharaoh and to bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Who am I? And I want you to check out the answer that God gives him. God said, I will be with you. In other words, when Moses said, who am I that I might do this? God didn't try to give him a pep talk and talk to him about how great he is. He didn't say, Moses, you're fantastic. Moses, you totally have the ability to do this. Moses, you've got all the gumption in the world. Just walk in. You've got the courage. I've seen you work. You have a fantastic background. Everything you touch turns to gold. God didn't say that at all. When Moses had self-doubt, God said, I will be with you. Whereas Moses, it's actually not about your resume. It's not about your self-confidence or who you think you are or who you think you are not. The only thing, Moses, you need to know about you is that I will be with you. I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. In other words, Moses, you just need to know, like, this is happening. And here's the sign, like, you're actually going to worship. You're going to bring these people out, and you're going to worship me here. That will happen. Moses said to God, oh, okay, right, sure. Okay, you'll be with me, whatever. Like, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? I mean, then what shall I tell them? He's just looking for excuses at this point. As if God's going to go like, oh, that's a great question. I never thought of that. Give me till Thursday, Moses. I'll get back to you. What am I going to tell them? God's answer is amazing, and we could do an entire sermon series on just his answer, but we'll just talk about it briefly today. But this is what he says. God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. The name you shall call me from generation to generation. I am. In other words, Moses, before the beginning of time, I am. And when time comes to a close, I am. And whatever question you have about me or about my being or my existence, you just need to know before anything else and after everything else, I am. And I will be with you. And Moses keeps seeing all of this in God's request through the lens of who he's not. God, I am not able to go to Pharaoh and to speak to him. And God answers, I am. God, I don't have the skill set to convince someone to let all of their slaves go. I am not capable of that. And God says, I am. God, I have major questions about like what I should do with my life or whether I even have any worth at all. Who on earth would even hear me when I pray or when I call out? I am. Who do I turn to? I am. Who's the person that can hold me and be with me? I am. This is the response of God to Moses because Moses needed to believe that God could be his all in all. If I'm going to be with you, you need to know who I am. I am everything you need. I am everything you can be. I am everything you need to lead. I am. You go talk to your people. And when they ask you who sent you, you tell them I am sent you. And this shall be my name forever and ever. Moses answered, because he's still not satisfied. What if, and see, I love this because he just keeps, okay, I got a bunch of hypotheticals for you, God. Basically, I'm not planning on doing this, so let me just give you a lot of reasons why. What if they do not believe me or listen to me and they say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. And the Lord said, throw it on the ground. This next passage is full of fantastic godly wisdom, so please pay attention to this next verse. Moses threw it on the ground and it became a snake and he ran from it. The takeaway from today is obvious. Run away from snakes, okay? If that's not clear at all, run away from snakes. And then we see later, then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. So just so that we're clear, because Inland Hills doesn't want to have to pay your medical bills, if you see a rattlesnake on a trail, do not take it by the tail, okay? We're not telling you to do that. Copyright 2019. Great. So Moses reached out. He takes the snake by the tail. It's the worst place you can pick up a snake. The best place to pick up a snake is not to do it at all. The second best place to pick up a snake is to get it close to its head so that it can't reach around and bite you. God tells Moses to take it by the tail because in a way, God is saying, trust me. This is not something smart that you should do. Trust me on this. My kids know this. Well, I took my kids hiking around a canyon trail close to Laguna Beach a couple of weeks ago. We had a really great time. But as we got to the beginning of the trailhead, my older son, Jack, is 6. He was so excited about being there. He's like, Dad, I'm so excited about going on the hike. And he's kind of like dancing around like this. He's very excited. And so then we get to the trailhead, and he's learning to read because he's in first grade. And he sees a giant sign with a big picture of a rattlesnake on it. And he's able to read enough for that sign to say, Dad, what's that? And I said, oh, it's a sign about rattlesnakes. And then I thought if I just explained it to him calmly, we'd be fine. There could be some snakes on the trail, but there almost certainly won't be. But if there are, it just says that they won't attack kind of unless you're aggressive toward them. So just don't do that. Kind of back off. Let me know if you see anything. He says, okay. And he went from dancing to we start walking down the trail, and he's just going the whole time. And so his brother, Will, who is 3 years old, and again, who we're really working on by the time he gets 4, being socially acceptable to others, just keeps making it worse because he keeps going, Jack, there might be rattlesnakes on this trail, Jack. Jack, I think I might see a snake over there, Jack. Like, he's just going on and on. Finally, we get to another sign, and Jack says, Dad, what's that? And it's a picture of a hummingbird, because there could be hummingbirds on the trail. And I said, oh, Jack, that's a hummingbird. We're about to go into the hummingbird part of the trail. We were in the snake part. Now we're going to the hummingbird part, Jack. And so Jack says, yes. And so everybody knows, like, snakes are a bad deal. You certainly don't pick them up by the tail. Moses is told to pick it up by the tail, and he does it. And the snake turns back into the staff. And then he goes forward, and we won't read all of this, but you can read it in a little bit. Lord says, this is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. But Moses still isn't fully convinced. And so God says, I want you to take your hand, stick it into your cloak, take it out. And what is it? Well, it's leprous now. Okay, well, stick it into your cloak, take it back out, and now it's healed. And now God says in chapter 4, if they don't believe the first sign, the staff into a snake, they may believe the second sign when you show them that your hand is leprous and then now it's not. If they don't believe the second sign, though, they will certainly believe you by the third sign. And for the third sign, I want you to take some water from the Nile and pour it on the ground, and I will turn it into blood. What God is telling him is, look, people are, you're right, they're hard to convince sometimes. But it's not like I don't have some tricks up my sleeve here. I'm the creator of the universe. I'm the one who put all of this together. If you need help in convincing them, I'm going to provide you with plenty of help. Throw the staff on the ground, I'll make it a snake. If that doesn't work, I'll make your hand leprous. But it's okay, I'll take it back. And if that doesn't work, take some water from the Nile, throw it on the ground, I'll turn it into blood. Moses, don't worry about this. I've got this. I am with you. I am with you. I'm with you. And it's helpful that God is shaping Moses and showing Moses what this will look like when he's on the backside of the mountain, hidden away from everyone else. Despise not the day of small beginnings. And it could be that you feel like you could take on so much more than what you have authority over right now. It feels like you could work at a higher level in the company you are, or you could do more if you started a new business venture, or you just have a lot more potential than the people around you seem to notice or to tap into. And sometimes we can get kind of bitter about that. And that bitterness can become increasingly unhelpful because it makes us resentful, sometimes towards the people we are working with, or the people who are our friends and family members, or even towards the company that we're working at. And I just want to remind us this morning that oftentimes it is when we were tucked away in the shadows, away from the spotlight, away from people looking at us, that God shapes us and molds us and crafts us and builds something inside of us so that when we leave those dark places and those crevices and we actually come out, He has now put something in us that we can unleash on the world. And this is what He's doing with Moses. On the backside of the mountain, far away from Pharaoh, He's teaching him, throw the staff on the ground, pick it up after it becomes a snake, take your hand in your cloak, take it out. He's just practicing him. He's letting him know, I'm with you. I've got this. We're going to craft this. We're going to work this together. When I was 26 years old, I started pastoring a really small church in Springfield, Missouri. It was a church that had been about 1,000 people at one point, and then, and this is crazy and a long story, but I'll shorten it, their own denomination sued them, and by the time I got there, they were down to 26 people. And over the first 6 weeks, through my dynamic leadership, I grew that church from 26 to 17. It was amazing. And so I met with those 17 people, and I basically said, do we want to continue on? Do we feel like God has a place for us here? That we're supposed to be doing something here? And we prayed about that together, and we believed that He did and that we were supposed to continue on. So my wife and I, we didn't have any kids at the time. We decided we're going to lean in really hard. And it wasn't a glamorous place to be, and it wasn't an exciting place to be. In fact, it was a scary place to be. And so what I decided I needed to do in the midst of that was to be faithful to what God had given me. God had given me these 17 people, and I didn't know if it was going to be for a few months or if it was going to be for a few years, but He'd given me these 17 people, and I was supposed to come alongside of this group of people and pastor them and to teach them. We were supposed to wrestle with the scriptures together and ask how it is that we can impact this town in the name of Jesus. And so over the next several months, I preached some of the best sermons of my life to 17 people. And I preached quite a few of the worst sermons of my life to 17 people. And we hung together, and God began to shape all of us, not just me, but that whole community, and mold us and to change us. And we saw people get added to that community and things grow out of that community, and exciting new ministries within our local community. We partnered with the domestic violence shelter and all kinds of other places because we had an enthusiasm. We felt like God had called us. And it was a wonderful point in my life because while I didn't have a ton of people I was reaching, God was molding me and shaping me on the backside of the mountain. And this is exactly what he's doing with Moses in this passage, and it may be exactly what he's doing with you right now, wherever you find yourself. But you want to be molded and shaped on the backside of the mountain so that when you stand before the Pharaoh, you have something to actually unleash on him. And so he tells Moses, look, here's how you do it. You're going to throw that staff on the ground. It's going to become a snake. Then you're going to pick it back up. You're going to put your hand in your coat and you're going to take it out. It's going to be leprous. You're going to put it back in and take it out and the leprosy is going to be gone. You're going to take water from the Nile and I'll turn it into blood. That way when you walk into the throne room of Pharaoh and you look at him and you say, let my people go, you have the confidence that I am with you. Nothing's worse than walking into the throne room of Pharaoh and saying, let my people go. Throw your staff on the ground and having it clang, 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 clang down the stairs. That's bad. So Moses, I've hidden you away. And in the midst of probably the lowest point of your life, I want you to know I'm here to build you up. I'm here to teach you and train you what this is going to look like. Because I want you to have the confidence that I am with you. Well, Moses has some other questions. Pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And commentators disagree about exactly what he means here. Some believe that he just felt like he wasn't eloquent in the way that a leader or a king or a pharaoh should be eloquent. And if he was going to go try to match wits with the pharaoh, he just didn't have that in him. But it's this end part that most commentators believe points to something different. He says, I'm slow of speech and tongue. Many commentators believe he actually had a speech impediment. That Moses, perhaps especially when he was stressed out or nervous or standing before someone with power, might struggle to get the words out of his mouth. And you can just imagine how someone who struggles with that already, who's being told to go to the highest seat of power in all of the world, may not have any idea how you can possibly approach that level of power. But God, you know that I struggle with my speech, and especially when I get nervous, I stand before him and I know that he's going to just make fun of me. You need power, and I'm not power. I'm going to stand in front of him and embarrass myself. I'm not eloquent. My tongue gets tied when I get nervous. How can you say to me to go stand in front of Pharaoh? That's not fair. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. Again, he doesn't say, Moses, actually, you have it all together. But as Moses raises yet one more complaint, he says, it's me. You go. I'm with you. And still Moses says, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. It takes some convincing. And over the next number of verses, God finally just knocks down every single argument that Moses has. And he does it by constantly reminding Moses that your ability to complete this was never about you in the first place. I am. In the 1830s, a young man by the name of James Hudson Taylor was born. And fairly early on in his life, he was exposed to Christianity and made some kind of decision to follow Jesus. But as a young teenager, he began to fall away from that and began to pursue other things. At 17 years old, Hudson Taylor had an encounter with Jesus Christ that he couldn't explain away, and something really changed inside of him. And he felt that he was supposed to follow after Jesus. So he put his hope in Jesus Christ at 17 years old, and then he took very seriously this verse at the end of the book of Matthew in chapter number 28 that tells the disciples of Jesus to go into all the world and to make disciples of every nation, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And so Hudson Taylor had at that time heard just a little bit about the nation of China. And he started realizing that, actually, China hasn't heard much about Jesus at all. That's just not been their origin story. And the gospel has struggled to penetrate that area of the world. And I feel like maybe I'm called to there. So at 17 years old, he made a commitment to go to mainland China and to start sharing the gospel there. Now, he knew that he had a lot of work to do. So right away, he started to learn Mandarin and Hebrew and Greek and Latin, which is probably more dangerous than picking a snake up by the tail. That's a lot of languages to try to learn at one time. He also tried to learn something about science and medicine and chemistry and pharmaceuticals. And so he was trying to gain this knowledge so that he would have something to offer people that was of very tangible value when he got there, that they may listen to him talk about a very abstract concept, but that he believed could wholly transform them. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so he learns, and then he gets reports in his early 20s that actually China has been really receptive to the gospel and that lots of people are giving their lives there. And so he goes to China, only to find out when he arrives that, frankly, the reports have been overblown and people have been misleading. And China has just entered into a civil war. He almost gets shipwrecked on the way. He almost loses his life. And when he gets there, China's in the middle of a civil war. Then he begins to travel the countryside and to go to 18 different regions and to share with them the gospel of Jesus. But he's dressed like a Westerner. He's wearing a black suit and he's got, Western haircut, and no one pays attention to him. Instead, they start calling him the Black Devil behind his back. And finally, he finds out that that's happening. So he loses the black suit. And he starts doing something that really no missionaries almost were doing back then, which is that they decided, instead of bringing my culture to this land, I'm going to adopt the culture of this land and show my respect and appreciation for these people. So he began to wear the same kind of garb that the men in that area of China were wearing. And he shaved the top of his head and grew out a long ponytail because he wanted to be helpful. And in fact, he began to devote his entire life, every moment of it, to reaching people in mainland China with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it was difficult work, but he began to be so enthusiastic about it that he actually wrote a letter home to his sister, and he said, if I had 1,000 pounds, and he's from the UK, so let's say dollars, if I had $1,000, all of it should go to China. If I had 1,000 lives, I would give it all to China. And then he says, no, not China, but Jesus. Jesus, the one who has come alongside of me and walked with me every step of every day, should have it all. The idea was that he kept meeting obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And no, he didn't arrive there knowing how to overcome those. And no, he didn't have some kind of inherent wisdom or knowledge for how to solve every problem that came his way. But what he did have is a promise that God would be with him. And God oversaw the work of Hudson Taylor for years. Over 18,000 people gave their lives in China because of the work that he and his other pastors did there over the course of a number of years. And he died at the age of 72. He says this, all God's giants have been weak men who did great things for God because they reckoned on God being with them. The takeaway this morning is simply this. God doesn't call the qualified. God qualifies the called. And if you are called to pursue Jesus Christ, if you are called to go share the gospel in your place of work, if you're called to continue climbing the corporate ladder that you might have influence over those who have influence over others, whatever you're called to do, God will equip you with. Maybe you have low self-confidence and low self-esteem, but here's the amazing thing. It was never about you to begin with. You are a son or a daughter of God. You're created in his image. You've been crowned with glory. He loves you infinitely. But if you were just dependent on your own skills and talents, you wouldn't have enough to do what God's leading you to do. Thankfully, you're not. I am is with you. He's with you. And it's important for us to remember that in our weakness, he is strong. In our fear, he is courageous. In our doubt, he is confident. May the peace of Jesus and the presence of the great I am be with you as you live into your calling in the world all around you. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that it's not up to us to see your kingdom come to earth as it is in heaven, but Father, that you're using us, and Father, that you're coming alongside of us, Father, that you are with us. Thank you for the ministry of people like James Hudson Taylor, who despite the odds was able to see a great impact for the kingdom, not because of his brilliance, but because of his reliance on you. And Lord, as we leave this place today and as we head back Monday into our places of business and work, as we mingle with our family and friends, Lord, would you please remind us each and every day that you are with us, you are for us, and you are calling us increasingly into what it is that you have for us. It's in Jesus' name we ask all these things. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching this message. It is our hopes that it encourages you and uplifts you in the week ahead. We also invite you to join us at one of our Sunday services here at 9, 11, or 5 p.m. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you here soon.